Today, we're looking at a brown ink by Papier Plume Pecan. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, there's timestamps down below, but if you've got the time, I would appreciate you checking out the entire video. If you'd like, you can follow me over on Instagram as an ink guy. Also, if you're new here, I do fountain pen ink reviews daily, so I would invite you to subscribe. To make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into this Viscosity Van Gogh with a medium nib. I wrote with it for a day and then used it to take my notes for this video. In order to have some standardization in my writing samples, I always use Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. I do test other papers, but those will show up later in the video. Now, let's look at the writing sample. I picked this ink up in sample form, so it comes in a vial like this. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X 450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X 750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's take a look at the Clairefontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, and some very nice shading that's going on. You see part of the P of Pecan is a little bit darker, the A is a bit darker, the I in Papier and the E is a little darker, the E in Plume is a little darker. So we get some darker letters occurring in the stub. Now the extra fine is about the same tone as the stub. It has no feather spread, halo sheen, it has great shading the whole way through. We get a constant peppering of dark spots within the writing, like the K in quick, B in brown, N in brown, X in fox, U in jumps, PS in jumps. It's like this all over, so I'm just going to call it that shading peppering that's occurring for this one. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is the same tone as the extra fine with no feather spread, halo sheen, and that shading peppering all over it. It is absolutely gorgeous. This is a fantastic brown. 9 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both show tons of color variation, and we get tons of color variation. Tomoe River. No bleeding, normal Tomoe River ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, only a couple darker spots. Like Plume starts darker, gets lighter, gets darker. There's not a lot up there with this. The extra fine is about the same tone, maybe slightly lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, the shading's just sort of, it's there. The peppering is there. It's not as standout. It's 9 seconds to dry. Medium is a slightly darker than the extra fine, not quite as dark as the stub. With no feather spread, halo sheen, the peppering's still there. It's just harder to stand out because the Tomoe River allows it to level more before it dries. 17 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both far left to far right does show color variation, and we do get it. Rhodia, no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather spread, no bleeding, no ghosting. I'm looking at my notes. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen, peppering all over it, that great pepper shading. It's just speckles of this darker all over. It's very nice. The extra fine is slightly lighter than the stub with no feather spread, halo sheen, that peppery shading all over where it's speckled all in these dark spots. It's very nice. 6 seconds to dry. Medium is a little bit darker than the extra fine, about the same tone as the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, the peppery shading all over it. Very nice. 10 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both show plenty of color variation, and we do get plenty of color variation. I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down and immediately put it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And this is an interesting chromatography making this brown. This is the reason that we get all of that peppery coloring, all those dark spots all the time. It starts with this very light red at the bottom, and it pushes up and we see a bright green and then a bright highlighter blue color across the top. And that is the reason that we're getting such a great brown. Because if we think of green as yellow and blue makes green, when you mix the three primary colors, you usually get a brown. But this one has a bit more of the blue in it, so that it's not a mud brown. It's just gorgeous. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. And that red has a line across the bottom that's slightly more there. I just don't really see it being a permanence issue.
Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it.
Looking at the highlighter, I would not use this in a note-taking situation. Not at all. And that's just, look at it. It's blown out, it's ugly, don't do it. Now, water is completely reactivating, lifting all this ink up off the page. Water is all that you're going to need to get this out of your pen. Pen Flush does everything that water does and nothing more. And the 1/3 bleach solution, it obliterates it, but you don't need to use it.
I test viscosity or flow with a thing called a tilt test. I'll link it somewhere down below or up in the cards. Now, for the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9.
Papier Plume Pecan has a viscosity of 1.69, making this a very wet ink.
To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples. Now, for the inks I've tested, I found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds.
Papier Plume Pecan has an average dry time of 10 seconds, making this a faster drying ink. Instead of finding inks that look like Papier Plume Pecan, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. Now, I wanted to go with a nice orange, and I chose Private Reserve's Shoreline Gold. The second writing sample is done on TWSBI, Leuchtturm 1917, and 28-pound copy paper. Here we're looking at TWSBI notebooks. No bleeding. There's some ghosting, but it's a thinner paper. It's normal for TWSBI, so yes, we have some ghosting. The 1.1 is no feather spread, halo sheen. It doesn't have the peppery shading, but it does have some shading. When you look at Plume, it goes from darker to lighter. The extra fine is slightly lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, peppery shading all over it. Absolutely gorgeous, 5 seconds to dry. The medium is the same tone as the extra fine, with no feather spread, halo sheen, peppery shading all over it. It's just nice, 7 seconds to dry. Scrubby for both shows, plenty of color variation, and we do get it. How about Leuchtturm 1917? No bleeding, no real ghosting. That wouldn't stop most people from using the back. Wouldn't stop me. The 1.1 has no feather spread, halo sheen, peppery shading. Very nice stuff. Starting a new term here for how to describe shading. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, peppery shading all over it. It's very nice. 5 seconds to dry. Now, the medium is darker than the extra fine and darker than the stub, with no feather spread, halo sheen, and no shading. 7 seconds to dry. In being darker, we lost it. Now the scrubby of the extra fine shows the color variation, and we got it. The medium shows none, and we got none. What about 28-pound copy paper? So, we do have some bleeding, we do have some very minor ghosting. The bleeding that's occurring is really getting deeper into the page. It is not coming through, it is not touching the page on the back. It's not any real problem. I think this is perfectly good to be able to use at work, if you're allowed brown inks at work. The medium at the top has no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade. The extra fine is the same tone, nope, slightly lighter than the medium, with no feather spread, halo sheen, no shade, and 1 second to dry. The scrubby shows no color variation. We didn't get any. And that is all that I have for the writing samples. So what do I think of Papier Plume Pecan? This comes across as a little bit off from most of the traditional browns that you would look at, which is a really good thing, and it's definitely a nice brown. It puts a great tone on the page with some very nice shading throughout all of the writing. So what nib and pen is going to give the best writing experience with this ink? A very wet pen is going to put down a glorious brown tone that's a little different than other browns. But I prefer a medium flow, medium nib pen to bring that brown down just a little bit and get to see some of this glorious shading.
If you've enjoyed this video and made it this far, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. And if you didn't like it, give me a thumbs down and tell me why. Thanks for watching.